This is the story of America's greatest car collectors and the hidden garages where automotive history lives on. These aren't museums, they're private sanctuaries, filled with machines that most people will never see in person. Vehicles worth more than houses, more than neighborhoods. We're talking about collections valued in the tens of millions, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars. Along the way, we'll encounter legendary marques, obsessive collectors, barn finds that defy belief, and the strange economics of treating cars as both art and investment. So let us begin. But first, what exactly makes a vintage American automobile worth more than its weight in gold? Now, to understand private car collections, you have to understand something about Americans and their automobiles. This isn't just about transportation, never has been. From the moment Henry Ford made the Model T affordable to the average worker, cars became extensions of identity, status symbols, freedom machines. And by the middle of the 20th century, American automakers were producing some of the most beautiful, powerful, and culturally significant vehicles the world had ever seen. The thing is, most of those cars ended up in junkyards, crushed, recycled, forgotten. That's what happens to machines. They wear out, they become obsolete. Their owners move on to the next model year, and the old car gets traded in or parked behind a barn somewhere to rust. But not all of them. Some survived, and the ones that survived in exceptional condition, the ones with documented histories and matching numbers and factory original everything, those became the foundation of private collections worth more money than most people will earn in several lifetimes. I mention this because the vintage car market operates on principles that seem almost irrational to outsiders. A 1967 Chevrolet Corvette L88, for example. Chevrolet made 20 of them that year, just 20. Today, one in perfect condition might sell for $3 million. $3 million for a Corvette. And that's not even close to the top of the market. The real heavyweight champions of American automotive collecting are the pre-war classics. Duesenbergs, Cords, Auburns, Packards. These were the cars of movie stars and industrialists, hand-built machines with custom coachwork that took months to complete. A Duesenberg Model J in excellent condition can sell for over $3 million. The supercharged SJ version? Double that. Easy. And if it has celebrity provenance, if it once belonged to someone famous, if it has a documented history that reads like a Hollywood script, the sky is the limit. But here's what makes private collections different from museum collections. Museums preserve cars for the public good. Private collectors preserve cars because they love them. And sometimes, honestly, because they're competing with each other. See, there's a whole subculture within the collector car world. These are people who've made fortunes in business, finance, technology, entertainment, and they've chosen to spend a significant portion of that fortune on automobiles. Not just buying them, restoring them, researching them, showing them at prestigious events like Pebble Beach and Amelia Island, building custom climate-controlled facilities to house them. The garages themselves are often architectural achievements. We're talking about buildings with museum-quality lighting, temperature and humidity controls more precise than most hospitals, polished concrete floors you could eat off of, and viewing areas designed for intimate gatherings of fellow enthusiasts. Some collectors have installed elevators to display cars on multiple levels. Others have built rotating platforms so every vehicle gets its moment in the spotlight. And the security? Well, let's just say these facilities are often more protected than banks. Motion sensors, pressure plates, redundant alarm systems, biometric locks. Some collectors don't even allow photographs. The locations of their garages are closely guarded secrets, known only to a small circle of trusted friends and fellow collectors. Now, the reason I bring this up is because it reveals something important about what drives these collectors. It's not just about owning valuable objects, it's about preservation, about saving these machines from the crusher, the neglect, the well-meaning but incompetent restoration attempt that destroys originality. The best private collectors see themselves as custodians of automotive history, temporary guardians of machines that will outlive them. Think about that for a moment. A car built in 1932 has already survived 90-plus years. Wars, recessions, changing tastes, fuel crises, emissions regulations that made its big, beautiful, inefficient engine essentially illegal to sell new. And yet it's still here, still running, still magnificent. That kind of survival requires care, dedication, money. And private collectors provide all three. Let me tell you about some of the marques that dominate these collections. American cars specifically, because there's something uniquely American about the whole enterprise. First, the muscle cars. These are the performance machines of the 1960s and early 1970s, the era when Detroit was locked in a horsepower war that produced some of the most iconic vehicles ever built. The Ford Mustang, the Chevrolet Camaro, the Dodge Challenger, the Plymouth Barracuda, the Pontiac GTO. Names that still make enthusiasts' hearts beat faster. But not all muscle cars are created equal. The truly valuable ones are the rare variants. The high-performance packages that were ordered by a handful of buyers back when these cars were new. A 1970 Plymouth Hemi Cuda convertible, for instance. Plymouth made 14 of them. 14. With the Hemi engine, the convertible body, and the 4-speed manual transmission, you're looking at one of the rarest and most desirable muscle cars in existence. At auction, one sold for over $3 million. The Chevrolet Corvette holds a special place in American collecting. The only true American sports car, as some would argue. Early examples, particularly the split-window coupe from 1963, command serious money. But the holy grail is the L88 racing package, factory installed, brutally powerful, and so rare that each surviving example is individually known and documented by enthusiasts. Then there are the Shelby Cobras. Carroll Shelby took a lightweight British sports car body, stuffed a massive American V8 into it, and created something that could humiliate European exotics at a fraction of the price. The 427 Cobra, with its big block Ford engine, is one of the most valuable American cars ever built. Genuine examples have sold for more than $5 million. I mean, think about that. $5 million for a car that was considered crude and brutal, even when it was new. But the vintage American car market isn't just about speed and power, it's also about style, about craftsmanship, about the era when automobiles were designed by actual artists, not committees following wind tunnel data and focus group feedback. The 1930s and 1940s produced some of the most beautiful cars ever made. The Duesenberg Model J, which I mentioned earlier, is often called the American Rolls-Royce. But that's not quite right. The Duesenberg was actually more expensive than a Rolls. More powerful, too. These were cars for people who had already achieved everything and wanted a machine that reflected that achievement. The coachwork on a Duesenberg is genuinely breathtaking. Each body was custom-built by specialty firms with names like Murphy, Durham, Rolston, and LeBaron. The customers could specify virtually anything. The result was a car that was as individual as its owner, a rolling statement of wealth and taste that has never been equaled. If you've made it this far, you're probably into this kind of stuff. Quick question, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. And hey, subscribe if you haven't. We do this every week. All right, back to the collections. Because here's where it gets really interesting. The economics of collecting vintage American automobiles have changed dramatically over the past few decades. What was once a hobby for eccentric enthusiasts has become a legitimate alternative investment class. Auction houses like Mecum, Barrett-Jackson, and Gooding & Company have turned car sales into spectator events, with bidding wars broadcast live to millions of viewers. This influx of investment money has had mixed effects on the hobby. On one hand, it's driven prices to levels that ensure the best cars will be preserved indefinitely. Nobody's going to let a $10 million car rot in a barn. On the other hand, it's priced many genuine enthusiasts out of the market. Cars that sold for $50,000 20 years ago now command $500,000. The barrier to entry for top-tier collecting has become astronomical. But the private collectors at the highest levels operate in a different world entirely. For them, the question isn't whether they can afford a particular car. The question is whether the car meets their standards, whether it has the right provenance, whether it fills a gap in their collection, whether it's worthy of a place in their garage. And this is where things get fascinating. The documentation, the research, the detective work that goes into authenticating a vintage American automobile. Every car has a story. Where was it sold new? Who were the original owners? How did it pass from hand to hand over the decades? Was it raced? Was it modified? Was it crashed and rebuilt? Was it stored properly, or did it spend years exposed to the elements? The answers to these questions can mean the difference between a valuable collector car and a beautifully restored replica with limited market appeal. Originality is everything. A car with its original engine, transmission, body panels, and paint is worth far more than one that's been restored with replacement parts, even if the restoration is technically superior. This obsession with documentation has created an entire industry of automotive historians, people who spend their days digging through factory records, old registration documents, period photographs, magazine articles, and insurance files, piecing together the histories of individual vehicles. A conclusive provenance can add hundreds of thousands of dollars to a car's value. And then there are the barn finds, the holy grail of collecting. A barn find is exactly what it sounds like. A valuable car discovered after decades of hidden storage, usually in a barn, garage, warehouse, or sometimes just sitting under a tarp in someone's backyard. These discoveries capture the imagination like nothing else in the collector car world. The fantasy is universal. Someone's grandfather buys a sports car in 1965, parks it in the barn when he gets married, forgets about it. Decades pass. The grandfather passes away. The family goes through his belongings and discovers, under a layer of dust and hay, a perfectly preserved time capsule worth a fortune. It sounds like a fairy tale, but it happens. Not often, but it happens. A 1967 Shelby GT500 found at a California warehouse. A 1969 Dodge Charger Daytona discovered in an Alabama barn. A collection of muscle cars hidden in a barn in Oklahoma, untouched for 40 years. These stories are catnip for collectors and enthusiasts alike. The condition of barn finds varies wildly. Some are remarkably well preserved, protected from sunlight and moisture by their dark, dry storage environments. Others are rusty hulks that will require complete restoration, but even a rough barn find can be valuable if the car is rare enough, because at least it's documented. At least it exists. At least it hasn't been modified or crashed or destroyed. The restoration of a barn find is a delicate process. Do you clean it up and preserve the patina, the accumulated evidence of its survival? Or do you restore it to factory-new condition, erasing its history in pursuit of perfection? Different collectors have different philosophies, and there's no right answer. Some prefer the storytelling quality of an unrestored survivor. Others want their cars to look like they just rolled off the assembly line. Either way, the costs are substantial. A proper restoration of a vintage American automobile can easily exceed the car's market value. The best restoration shops charge hundreds of dollars per hour, and a complete frame-off restoration can take thousands of hours. Chrome plating, paint matching, upholstery work, engine rebuilding, the labor is incredibly specialized, and the craftsmen who can do it properly are becoming rarer every year. But for serious collectors, the cost is beside the point. What matters is getting it right, preserving the integrity of the machine, ensuring that future generations will be able to experience these automobiles as they were originally intended. The social aspects of collecting are worth mentioning, too. The community that forms around these shared obsessions, the friendships between collectors who might never have met otherwise, the events that bring these machines and their owners together. Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance is the pinnacle. Held annually in California, it's the Academy Awards of the collector car world. The world's finest automobiles compete for best of show, judged on authenticity, restoration quality, and overall elegance. Winning at Pebble Beach can add millions to a car's value. More importantly, it validates years of research, restoration, and dedication. Other events cater to different tastes. The Amelia Island Concours d'Elegance on Florida's Atlantic coast, the Goodwood Revival in England, where participants dress in period costume, the various auctions held throughout the year where collectors both buy and sell, constantly refining and improving their holdings. And what of the collectors themselves? The men and women who dedicate substantial portions of their lives and fortunes to these machines? They come from all backgrounds, though obviously wealth is a prerequisite at the highest levels. Technology entrepreneurs, finance executives, entertainment figures, heirs to family fortunes, self-made business owners who never forgot the cars they lusted after as teenagers. The motivations vary too. Some are genuine historians, motivated primarily by preservation. Others are investors, treating cars as assets in a diversified portfolio. Some are competitors, driven by the desire to win at concours events. Others are simply enthusiasts who love driving, who want to experience the mechanical connection to the road that modern cars have largely engineered away. There is also an element of nostalgia. Many collectors are drawn to the cars of their youth, the vehicles they remember from their childhood, the ones their fathers drove or their neighbors owned, or they saw in magazines and dreamed about. Buying those cars as adults is a way of reclaiming something, a connection to a simpler time perhaps, or just the satisfaction of finally possessing something once beyond reach. The demographics of collecting are changing, which has implications for the market. The generation that came of age during the muscle car era is getting older. The 1960s and 1970s cars that dominated the market for decades may be approaching a generational transition. What happens when the people who have personal memories of these cars are no longer the primary buyers? Some predict a shift toward newer vehicles. The Japanese sports cars of the 1990s, the German performance machines of the 2000s, the first electric supercars. Each generation defines value according to its own experiences and preferences. Others believe that true quality transcends generational boundaries. A beautiful Duesenberg will always be a beautiful Duesenberg, regardless of whether the buyer has any personal memory of the era it represents. Art is art. Craftsmanship is craftsmanship. The fundamental appeal of a superbly designed and built automobile doesn't diminish just because the buyer was born after it was made. The truth is probably somewhere in between. The market will evolve, as markets always do. Some categories will rise, others will fall. But the core premise of private collecting will remain unchanged. People with means will continue to seek out exceptional automobiles. They'll continue to preserve them, protect them, and pass them along to the next generation of custodians. Looking at these collections today, it's hard not to feel a sense of wonder. Here are machines that were built by human hands, designed by human imaginations, and somehow survived the decades through a combination of luck, care, and devotion. They represent something uniquely American: the optimism, the ambition, the willingness to dream big and build to match. The cars themselves are frozen moments in time. Every line, every chrome detail, every stitch in the upholstery reflects the aesthetic sensibilities of its era. Looking at a perfectly preserved 1936 Cord 810, with its disappearing headlights and supercharged engine, you're seeing exactly what wealthy Americans saw when they walked into a showroom 87 years ago. That kind of preservation is valuable, not just in monetary terms, but culturally. And that is the story of private vintage American automobile collections. Not just as investments or hobbies, but as acts of preservation. Wealthy individuals dedicating resources to saving machines that might otherwise have been lost to time. The finest examples of American automotive engineering and design, protected and maintained for future generations to appreciate. Subscribe if you want more, and let me know in the comments. What's your dream car? The one you'd buy if money were no object? Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.